You're listening and watching Rashkin Report. This is Yuri Rashkin. Thanks to everyone who is supporting this channel on Patreon. You are my heroes. Patreon is a important platform that gives opportunity to support this and other worthwhile projects, and also allows you the opportunity to offer questions for our guests. For instance, today we have several interesting questions for my today's guest, who is none other than Vladislav Inozemtsev, one of the most respected and well-known economists today in Russia and from Russia. Vladislav, thank you so much for being part of this broadcast.
The pleasure is mine.
Well, we have a lot of questions. First, let's begin. What is your response to January protests in Russia and to the punishing reaction to it from the government? Is this good for the economy, or is this doesn't affect the economy?
Look, it's the sources and the origins of the problem, of course, they lie in political sphere. And so therefore, I wouldn't say it has a crucial importance for the economic development, because many people try to argue that, that foreign investment will evaporate, the investment climate goes down. But actually, the investment climate is so bad in Russia, and the economic perspective of any foreign investors are very uncertain. So I do not, I wouldn't say that all these political developments will affect too much the economic environment in Russia. Of course, it might be some kind of financial problems, because if you look on the budget, on the balance sheets of the Russian banks these days, you see that the Minister of Finance mobilized a lot of funds from the banks, from its own accounts in the state-owned banks. So the overall amount of money which is on the accounts of the Russian banking system decreased almost twice, almost by half, from around 4 trillion to a little bit more than 2 trillion rubles just in 2 weeks. So therefore, maybe in this case, the budget, the Minister of Finance, and its actions affect somehow the economic stability, and it will cause a little bit of the trend for rates to increase. But even this development, I think, is quite short term, or maybe medium term. But in general, I do not expect too much to happen because of this protest, because I think they will actually slow down in coming weeks.
All right. How do you view the role of Alexei Navalny in this, and also the response to it from the United States government and world community? Navalny was nominated now for Nobel Peace Prize. Do you see this as a promising development, or more of a PR? I don't know. How do you look at this?
Look, Navalny is one and only person responsible for this turnaround, because actually he is very brave guy, very devoted to his cause, and he initiated all this investigation, all this anti-corruption activity many years ago. And so, of course, it was his poisoning, of course, it was his return, and of course, it was the release of this investigative movie he produced about the Putin's palace on the Black Sea coast that actually blown out the situation. So therefore, of course, Navalny is the major figure behind this protest. The second point is how predictable was the sequence. Of course, it was predictable, because everyone knows in Russia that Navalny was informed just a little bit before the New Year, New Year's Eve, that he is on the list of the searched people, of the wanted people in Russia. So it was a clear signal that he should not return, but he returned. So therefore, I would say there is no justice in Russia, and there's no judiciary system completely. It is completely destroyed. And it was destroyed, I think, from the time of the Yukos processes against Khodorkovsky in mid-2000s. But nevertheless, so therefore, the Russian leadership had no other option than to respond with arresting Navalny upon his arrival, and then of jailing him, to give him a real sentence for 2.5 years yesterday. So therefore, I think that this was predictable. The last part of your question, response from the Western community. Look, I would say that response actually can be very limited because you have some laws adopted in the United States and internationally, like for example the famous Magnitsky Act, which actually enables you to punish some people immediately or directly involved into prosecution of political figures or unlawful prosecution of businessmen or whatsoever. So therefore, I completely agree that definitely the United States government can put some people from Moscow Police Department, Ministry of Interior, some judges who actually handled to Mr. Navalny the sentence, to this sanction list, and this will be a natural response to the situation. But when I got the information that one of Navalny's supporters and his close aides, Mr. Ashurkov, sent to Mr. Biden the list of 35 individuals who should be sanctioned after this incident, I actually cannot believe that something like this may happen, because there's no connection at all between Mr. Abramovich, a wealthy Russian guy who owns the Chelsea Football Club in London, and Navalny imprisonment. So therefore, to say that because my friend Mr. Navalny is now in prison, Mr. Biden, should sanction Mr. Abramovich, it's a pure nonsense. So therefore, the next point is that, of course, the United States, I expect them to react much more intensively on something coming from Russia affecting the American security and the American domestic problems. For example, when you hear that some Russian officials or Russian mercenaries are talking about, giving some money for Afghan fighters who kill American soldiers, this is actually a huge accusation, and this is actually, it should be on the radars of American foreign policy, as well as, for example, if the Russian hackers are interfering into, American databases. But what happens actually in the streets of Moscow is, I would say, a secondary issue for the American policymakers. I think the people will be much more concerned with, for example, a military coup in Myanmar than of what is going on in Moscow streets.
All right. Well, that about sums it up. Vladislav, how do you look at the situation in the United States itself, considering from the first point of view that you have such huge flood of money coming in connected with the pandemic? Right now we're talking about $1.9 trillion. And second, just a general, decline in number of workplaces because we have greater automatization and modernization of our production. How do you see American economy in this context?
Look, in general, I'm quite optimistic because, first of all, if you take this into the historical context, you see that one time after another, American economy successfully recovered from different crises. And actually, as I studied the theory of post-industrial society and all the technological progress quite intensively for years, I read a lot of texts and books from late 60s and 70s predicting that, the unemployment rate by the year 2000 will be around 30% and then even higher. And this will be, long-term unemployment that cannot be actually successfully overcome. But the problem is that actually nothing like this happened. And American economy, where several branches, several industries actually completely disappeared during these years, it managed to set up another industries and to get to produce huge demand for workforce. If you compare the American economy, for example, starting from 1973 till 2010, I don't know about the most recent statistics, but for this, around 40 years, the amount of workforce employed in the American economy increased by around 40%, while in the EU 27, it increased by maybe 6/7%. So this is a absolutely huge difference. American economy produces much more new jobs than any European economy does. So therefore, I think that this now is the moment of truth for the American economy, because the pandemic showed that, reflected that many types of ordinary businesses can be actually, reframed these days. For example, I expect very huge blow for years, which will be done to the airline industry, because there is not so much need in traveling for business as it was before, as was considered before. Hotel industry, and of course the commercial and office real estate, they will be actually hit very hard. And in all these cases, I expect some huge trends, new trends to appear in coming years. But in general, most of the industries, they will not suffer too much after the pandemic regulation or the pandemic, the quarantine is lifted. So this is one part of the question. Another part of the question is that, look, we cannot, even now, we cannot evaluate entirely how big and how influential this injection of money, money that was printed by Federal Reserve and authorized by the federal government can be, because I expect that what is obvious is that the investment rate, the savings rate ratio exploded last year, and the net worth of the American citizens, American households also increased, even despite the contraction in GDP. So we saw a very special situation, because I can't remember any other year when real estate prices went up during the GDP decrease. So we are in an entirely new world produced by this new monetary policy, modern monetary policy, MMT, like some people used to say. And so therefore, I will be very, very cautious in predicting some long-term trends. So, but anyway,
does it mean that the ideas of George Bernard Keynes no longer apply?
I think so, because Keynes, his major ideas were targeting, the interest rates and actually the budget deficit. And now we see actually the negative or zero negative interest rates, which can be a long-term new trend in the economic activity. And if you don't pay anything for borrowing money, so the amount of the money you borrowed, the amount of the national debt actually doesn't matter at all. And this is absolutely new situation compared to anything we saw before. So
okay, but I'm just trying, your understanding of this is far deeper than mine. But my understanding of Keynes was that the government has a role to play, and by stimulating private markets, it can move the economy forward and be an important, useful player in the economy and the consumer economy. Am I completely wrong? Or
no, you are right. And so this feature, it is it may be found even now, and the policy is actually alongside this theory. But the problem is in numbers, from my point of view, because Keynes never anticipated the idea that the government can pay negative rates for attracting debts. So this is a matter of amount of the money which can be brought into the economy, and therefore I would say in the times of Keynes, the issues of, for example, stock market were quite not so important as they are now, because the valuation of American stock market, even before the great crash of 1929, was maybe less, or around 50% of GDP. Now we have 180% of this valuation. So a huge amount of national wealth is put into this stock market, into all kinds of assets, which are actually much more expensive than they were ever before. So this is a new reality, I would say, and actually the consumer economy and the consumer spending are now make now much less part of the national wealth as before. Also, I would say that the idea of inequality, which is actually very much exploited by the Democrats and socialists, has also very different meaning, because everyone, like people like Ocasio-Cortez or Mr. Sanders, they are talking about the huge income, the huge financial inequality. But if one looks, for example, on how much Bill Gates or Elon Musk earned last year, it's enormous sums of money. It's around $100 billion that Elon Musk made during 2020. But at the same time, if you look on personal consumption, it's absolutely different picture, because Bill Gates, gets more than 2 million times more money per year than average American, but he consumes maybe 20,000 times more, and the difference is 100 times. It's a very huge difference, and I wouldn't say that the IRS should tax the incomes. I think that much more just option is to tax the consumption, and this can make a lot of difference in future economic development.
Isn't taxation on consumption a tax on poverty?
Look, this is another idea we can debate, but look, for
I'm
example,
just like this. This is
no,
so
no,
fascinating for me, but we have other questions. But go ahead.
No, yeah, but look, for example, we are in a world which differs a lot from the world of 1970s, because in the 1970s you might have an opportunity to create a company in BVI, but it will take you a lot of money. You will travel there, IRS will see on everything what you are doing there, and so the offshore economy was very, very small. After the Panama Papers were published, you can see that there are not hundreds of billions, there are trillions of dollars there every year. So therefore, I would say that now the nation states, the governments, they have very few, very little possibilities not to control all this, and the money will flow out and out of the American economy as well as the German and British or whatsoever. After President Trump announced his tax reform, if I'm not mistaken, only one company called Apple brought back around $350 billion back to the United States from their offshore jurisdictions. So the most important issue is not taxing the rich, is to bring out back the money which are now not working in the United States. And if you switch the taxes from the income taxes, from the payroll taxes to property taxes, sales tax and whatsoever, you will create a very huge, the biggest economy of the world can be an offshore economy de facto, because in this case you will have any motive for taking money out of it. Moreover, a lot of foreign money can flow in if you don't have, for example, payroll tax and the tax on income. It's it's absolutely different issue, but what the countries in the world of the 21st century would be will compete in will be the best place to invest money and the best place actually to earn more money. And the idea to raise taxes is actually something which leads us to a kind of a dead end.
All right. In that case, speaking of dead ends, let's take a look at, in conclusion, Europe and Brexit. How do you see consequences for Great Britain and for the European Union? To what extent do you see London keeping its position as one of the main world financial centers, global centers?
Look, it will depend. I would say that London was played its role as a financial center, not because it was a part of the European Union, but predominantly because it had more flexible tax jurisdictions and tax laws, and actually the business environment in Britain was much better than in France, for example. And this matters at the time. Now, of course, many companies, many financial companies, banks, will turn away from UK. For if they operate in Europe, they of course will choose either Frankfurt, maybe Amsterdam, in some cases Paris, but definitely more Amsterdam or Frankfurt. And therefore, UK can suffer some kind of capital outflow and something like this. That I think a lot of trends will depend on what the British government will do in, I would say, in foreign policy field in the coming years, because actually, the United Kingdom was for years kind of a link which united Europe and America, and therefore, by losing this, I would say, this status, Britain will try to find out some other connections to, to the world, because with its history of global power, I think it definitely will try to find some new global role for itself. And I think that we saw some kind of signs that it might be special relationship between UK and Turkey, UK and post-Soviet space like Ukraine. And I would suggest, it's just my suggestion, I just published a huge article on this in a French leading foreign policy journal, which is called Politique Internationale, in February last year, suggesting that what the British should do is to revive the EFTA, the European Free Trade Association, which now formally exists till now under the Vaduz Convention. And so therefore, if UK produces a kind of another bloc, trade tree area between itself, between Switzerland, between Norway, between Turkey, Ukraine maybe, or countries in the Balkans. So in this case, it might be, two-speed Europe, which was highly debated for years, both in Brussels and in London. And in this case, UK can find its new role, and the Europe can actually breathe quite more normally, because it will not be abused by the ideas of enlargement. And so there are a lot of different combinations in this field, but actually I'm absolutely sure that the British will try to find their new place in the after-Brexit world.
Vladislav, I think it's a fascinating possibility for a new global British empire that involves all this other economic connections from all these countries that maybe are not quite in this alliance or not quite in that alliance.
I'm not very optimistic on this in the case, because I would say that if you want to, the Brits to do something in absolutely different way, just publish your advice in France.
Well, Vladislav Inozemtsev, Russian academician who is the director of the Moscow-based Center for Research in Post-Industrial Societies, nonprofit think tank. Thank you so much for being part of this stream. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure. Thank you.